All right. Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about leveraging scenario analysis in corporate strategy. So when we talk about corporate strategy is about making decisions that position an organization for long-term success. So as a leader, you must determine where your organization is going, how it will compete, how it will allocate all its resources, and how it will spend or how it will respond to change. And one of the greatest challenges in strategic leadership is uncertainty, right? Because we don't know. Markets can shift, technology will evolve, customer expectations always change. Uh, your competitor might make an unexpected move, and then there's also social, political, and economic conditions that can change and disrupt even the strongest plans, right? So this is where scenario analysis becomes valuable. Now, when we talk about scenario analysis is a strategic planning tool that can help you examine possible future conditions and prepare for different outcomes. So instead of assuming that the future will unfold in a predictable way, because it won't, scenario analysis encourages you to ask what could happen, what would affect my organization, what should we do if the scenario becomes a reality. So it is scenario analysis isn't about predicting the future perfectly. It's more about preparing your organization to think strategically, respond quickly, and make better decisions for uncertainty. It would allow you, the leader, to test any assumptions you have, identify any risk, explore all opportunities, and possibly create flexible strategies that can adapt to different conditions. So, a company can use scenario analysis to examine, what can happen if customer demand increases rapidly. So, if a new competitor enters the market and the supply chains costs rise, if new regulations are introduced, or even if AI changes the way workers perform, right, in your industry or in your organization. Each of those scenarios gives you, the leader, an opportunity to think through potential impacts before the organization is forced to react. And so, what we do with 3HP Leadership and in my company, TMTSI, we first look at the purpose element, and our purpose element helps leaders remain grounded in the organization's mission, values, and strategic direction, right? So when you're facing uncertainty, your organization can become reactive, right? But you don't want your organizations to chase trends or imitate competitors or make short-term decisions, that move itself away from its core identity. What scenario analysis does, it helps you examine possible futures while still asking which response aligns with who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. So a purpose-driven scenario analysis ensures that the strategy isn't only based on market pressure, but also on your mission alignment. For example, if a healthcare organization is preparing for changes in technology, it must consider not only efficiency and cost, but also patient care, access, ethics, and trust. The purpose keeps your organization from losing its identity while adjusting to the change. The other element that we look at with 3HP leadership is the people element. We know corporate strategy affects people at every level: employees, customers, leaders, investors, partners, and communities and suppliers, right? And they all may be impacted with your or by your strategic decisions. Scenario analysis requires you, the leader, to consider how different conditions will affect these stakeholders. So a people-centered approach asks important questions like, how will this scenario affect employees' roles? What skills will our workforce need? How might customers respond? Who may experience the greatest burden? What support systems will be necessary? For example, if a company is considering an automation as a future part of its strategy, scenario analysis should not only focus on cost savings, it should also focus on examining workforce development, retraining, possibly what employee morale, job redesign, and even ethical responsibility. Strategy becomes stronger when you, the leader, consider both organizational outcomes and human impact. Now, the third element is the process. Under 3XP leadership, we talk about the process element, right? And when it comes to scenario analysis, your scenario analysis must be supported by a disciplined process. As a leader, you can't just simply brainstorm possibilities and call it strategy, right? You need a structured approach for identifying key uncertainties, and for developing any realistic scenarios. You also need that structured approach for analyzing any implications and determining your strategic options. So the process in that case may include gathering data or reviewing the industry trends or identifying internal strengths and weaknesses while assessing external threats and opportunities. And then you also are engaging your stakeholders in strategic conversations. A strong process helps you move from speculation to informed decision making. The process element also helps organizations avoid narrow thinking, right? Sometimes you have leaders that assume the future will look like the present, or they will only plan for the outcome they prefer. Scenario analysis challenges that mindset, and it pushes leaders to consider best case, worst case, and most likely scenarios. It also encourages leaders to identify early warning signs that may indicate which future is beginning to emerge. So when you have the purpose, people, and process element, and you align those, then you are positioning your organization for stronger performance. And again, performance especially in scenario analysis is not limited to just financial results, right? Performance can also include your resiliency, your adaptability, your innovation, your risk management, your stakeholder confidence, and long-term sustainability. Organizations that use scenario analysis effectively are better prepared to respond to disruption because they already considered multiple paths forward. Scenario analysis also supports better resource allocation. So leaders can determine which investments are useful across multiple scenarios, which decisions may only make sense under certain conditions. For example, invest in employee development, digital infrastructure, customer relationships, and operational flexibility may strengthen your organization in many possible futures. But a key benefit of scenario analysis is that it helps leaders move from reactive leadership to proactive leadership. Reactive organizations wait until disruption happens and then scramble to respond. You don't want to be like that. You want your organization to be proactive, right? Because proactive organizations, they study possible futures, they prepare options, they build a strategic flexibility before the pressure becomes urgent. So in corporate strategy, this kind of preparation is essential. The pace of change in today's business environment is fast. So it's going to require you to think beyond annual plans or short-term goals, right? You must be able to imagine future possibilities, challenge any assumptions, right? And prepare your organization to adapt without losing direction. Now, scenario analysis is only useful if you are willing to act on what you learn. So if your organization develops scenarios but don't adjust its strategy, improve its processes, or prepare its people, then the exercise becomes just a theory, right? Scenario analysis should lead to strategic choices, contingency plans, investment decisions, and leadership action. So when you use scenario analysis, and especially when we use it within our 3XP leadership, it's more than just a planning exercise, right? The purpose keeps strategy aligned with the mission. People ensure decisions consider stakeholder impact. The process creates a disciplined structure, and the performance measures whether my organization is prepared, adaptable, or even effective. So leveraging scenario analysis in corporate strategy allows organizations to prepare for uncertainty with greater confidence, right? it helped you think beyond one expected future and consider, all the possibilities that there are out there. And if you can't consider all of them, but you consider the ones that will really affect your organization, right? It can also strengthen your decision making by helping your organization identify risks, take advantage of those opportunities that we just talked about, and remaining flexible in changing conditions, right? Because we already know the future will always contain uncertainty, but uncertainty doesn't have to create, um, you know, it doesn't have to create outfit paralysis, right? It doesn't have to create that within your organization. And we see a lot of organizations, become paralyzed when it comes to uncertainty. But what I like to do with my organization and then within 3P leadership is anytime there's uncertainty, we keep moving forward regardless, right? And some people are like, it's like moving forward in the dark, right? If it's really dark, you can't see. Most people just freeze, they stop. But what I like, for our leaders to do is like, listen, if you walk into a dark room, right, and you walk into this room many times before, with the lights on, then as when the lights are on, you need to study the room, right? You need to know what's where and pretty much, how things are set up. So when the lights do go out, and there's uncertainty when you walk in the room, then you can pretty much still move. You might not be able to move at the same speed or same pace, but you still can move forward, right? So with scenario analysis and our 3XP leadership, we move forward with clarity, with discipline, and with purpose, right? So I urge for strategic leaders to not simply wait for the future to happen. They need to prepare for it, shape their response, and position their organizations to perform in whatever environment emerges.